Welcome back to Basement Philosophy, or Philosophy from the Depths. So this week we'll be looking at the reading list for the topic of the problem of evil. And there are 13 different items to cover, so let's get going. We will start with Islam and the problem of evil. And that's chapter 12 of the Cambridge Companion to the problem of evil. And this chapter explains the Islamic idea of suffering as a test and as a punishment, the topic we looked at in the first segment. And next is a journal article entitled Evil and Suffering in Islamic Thought. And this article focuses on the idea of suffering as a test. And it looks at how two philosophers from Islam's past have dealt with this. And the two philosophers being Al-Ghazali and Rumi. And now we have a video entitled The Islamic Response to the Problem of Evil. And in dealing with this, the presenter identifies what he thinks of as two unwarranted assumptions that are often made by those who press the problem of evil. First of all, he thinks that people assume that God is only good, loving, merciful, and powerful. And secondly, he thinks that people assume that God has not given us any good reasons for evil and suffering. Next, we have the canonical book of Job, and that's to be found in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament. There are many different translations of this. I've just provided a link to one of them, which is the New International Version. So if you follow the link, you'll come to chapter 1. Now there are 42 chapters in the book in total. So to access each chapter, you'll need to click the link by the right hand side of the translation. And then we have a video resource as well. It's just a quick overview of the main things that happen in the book of Job. It's useful as an introduction to the book itself, so you've got a rough idea of what to expect, but it's not a substitute for actually reading the book of Job. And here we have an article entitled The Problem of Evil and the Book of Job. Now this article argues that the moral to draw from the book of Job is that there may be many reasons for evil, so everybody must seek their own solution. And another journal article, this one entitled Job and the Problem of Evil. This one argues that the book of Job doesn't try to resolve the theoretical problem of evil, but instead it tries to answer a different question, namely, how does one cope with evil? Now, if you want to go into the subject a bit further, it's worth looking at how Job is dealt with by Maimonides in his Guide for the Perplexed, a 12th century work of Jewish philosophy. Maimonides offers a reasonably detailed analysis of the book of Job and suggests that the moral to draw from it is that our happiness depends on attaining knowledge of God through wisdom or philosophy, and not simply by accepting whatever tradition we happen to be acquainted with. Curiously, Christian philosophers tend not to say an awful lot about the book of Job, even though it is part of their Old Testament. But this article, called God's Goodness and God's Evil, is an exception. This article suggests that we should adopt Job-like belief when we encounter evil. And here we have Elie Wiesel's play, The Trial of God. So this is the play that we looked at in the third segment this week. Although I offered an outline of it there, it was only an outline, so I'd recommend reading the whole play to get a better sense of its depth. But it's not a lengthy read, perhaps an hour, maybe an hour and a half for the whole thing. And next we have a journal article about Wiesel's play. This article offers some useful analysis. It discusses the play in connection with protest theodicy and also process theology, which sees God's power as limited. And then we have a web resource. This time it's an interview with Elie Wiesel from 2005. In this interview, Wiesel refers to his faith as having been wounded by the Holocaust, but not destroyed by it. And lastly, we have a book called Deconstructing Theodicy: Why Job Has Nothing to Say to the Puzzle of Suffering. The argument of this book is that we shouldn't try to use the book of Job to explain evil or justify God, because that's not what it's all about. In fact, this book says that the book of Job is there precisely to stop us trying to do that. And the book also contains an interesting chapter on Job as he features in the Quran. So, that's it for this week. And I'll see you next week for another installment of Basement Philosophy.